تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. أحبابي وآبائي الكرام، طبتم وطاب ممشاكم وتبوأتم من الجنة منزلا. نسأل الله العظيم رب العرش العظيم أن يجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما ولا يجعل من بيننا شقيا ولا محروما. لازلنا مع سيرة النبلاء. We are still continuing the seerah of the Salaf, and last week we began the seerah of a notable man who changed the course of history. Does anybody remember his name? Omar ibn Abdelaziz. عمر بن عبد العزيز، وهو من هو الرجل الثقة العالم الخالف أمير المؤمنين ذو النسب العالي والقمة العالية والأخلاق العالية. A man who came from a noble lineage and lived up to his nobility. A man who brought justice and honor back to Islam. A mujaddid, a reviver of the deen. A man who would be labeled and titled as Amir al-Mu'mineen, the leader of the believers. And some of the tabi'een said that he is considered the fifth Khalif al-Rashid due to his impeccable and outstanding resemblance to the Khulafa al-Rashidun al-Mahdiyun, Abu Bakr wa Umar wa Uthman wa Ali radiyallahu anhum wa sahabati ajma'een. A man who only ruled, we said, for 2 years. And what he accomplished in those 2 years was beyond understanding. This shows you that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills the betterment of the ummah, it can happen within 2 years, 2 days. إنما أمره, Allah Azza wa Jal, when He commands something, it is just a command. For us, the space and the time is irrelevant. We cannot control that. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He changed the course of the Umayyad Empire in this man's khilafah. If you look at their rule, the Umayyads, it was flawed, it was tainted, it was full of bid'ah, full of chaos. Walakin this is, those 2 years that Umar ibn Abdul Aziz ruled for were sufficient enough to cover for all of that. Subhanallah. And as we mentioned, Rahmatullah alayh, he came to the Khilafah, or he was selected to be the Khalifa without his irada, without his will. Does anybody remember who was the Khalifa before him? Sulaiman, who was Ibn Ammihi, who was the son of his uncle, Ibn Abdul Malik. And he deliberated how to deliver and to give him the Khilafah, knowing that his brothers, Sulaiman's brothers, would be against this. And subhanallah, it was deliberated that they would give the bay'ah to Sulaiman and to agree before they even knew who he selected. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose. And when he was declared the Khalifa, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he refused the Khilafah. Immediately as he climbed the minbar of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he fell down. On 3 occasions, he could barely stand up to deliver the sermon. But the first words that he said was that, I never chose this, I never wanted this responsibility, and I relinquish and I relieve myself of it. Please choose another Khalifa. فَصَاحَ كُلُّ النَّاسِ. All the people in the masjid, they said, no, we choose you as the Khalifa. صَاحُوا صَيْحَةَ رَجُلٍ وَاحِدٍ نُرِيدُكَ أَنْتَ الْخَلِيفَةِ. Then we left it there where he gave his famous khutbah, and he mentioned how this is a responsibility. Kulluna, we all want the nobility, the status, the acknowledgement, the recognition, forgetting the responsibility. But Umar ibn Abdelaziz, he understood fair well, and he mentioned that in his khutbah, and he said that this is a burden and a responsibility that he did not wish for, he did not desire. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought it upon him, and he asked those around him to aid him in order to obtain the good and to forbid the evil. There's many narrations of his khutbah, but this was one point that struck me. Any affair that you have, any mas'ala, any matter that you are in, ya imma ما بين جلب مصلحة أو دفع مفسدة. This is الدين كله يدور حول ذلك. The entire stipulation of the deen, of this deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this life is between two states. It's either you're obtaining the good or forbidding the evil. This is what the deen is brought for. يا إما جلب والدين جاء لجلب المصالح وتكميلها ودفع المفاسد وتقليلها. So Umar ibn Abdelaziz, he saw this as an opportunity to state this, because it is an entire ummah's concern to bring about the good, to obtain it, to uphold it, and to repel or to forbid the evil and to minimize it. For us today, it's not a concern. صدقني وكن صادق مع نفسك. Realize this, it's not a concern for you or me. Our concern has gotten so petty to think and to question, are my teeth straight enough? Are they white enough? Am I making enough money to buy this? Where will I be 20 years from now? Isma. These are concerns that you have been plagued with that are irrelevant. Because the state of the ummah is in such a dire state that they are making us divert our attention to the pettiest of issues. To the pettiest of issues. Do I have enough likes on my social media? A'udhu billah. When we do not know the common concern, these are issues that have plagued the youth and the minds and the hearts and the souls of the men and women of this ummah. And I see it on a regular basis. For those of you who are active on social media, you will see and read pitiful comments where people are so concerned about meaningless subjects, meaningless matters, umur tafiha, that have no basis. But we have forgotten that the greater good is far more superior than the singular. المصالح العامة مقدمة على المصالح الخاصة. This is another قاعدة أصولية that Umar ibn Abdelaziz lived with, and I'll show you. The general greater good of the mujtama is superior or comes first and primary to the singular good. So next time you're thinking about buying some piece of clothing or a phone or something new, think, would that money benefit the greater good more than it would benefit me? We don't think like that. Lil'asaf, it's all about me, myself, and I. In the selfish state of the West, the capitalistic consumer. We think of, how do I present myself? How do I become more pleasing? How do I gain my happiness? It's about my like, it's about my concern. Everything is me, myself, and I. Umar ibn Abdelaziz, these are qualities of leadership that are lacking. We don't have that. Even our leaders today, within our own communities, they lack these qualities. It's about my position. I was voted in. I'm the president. You heard this. And if you didn't hear it, you've seen it. You see that as soon as somebody takes this position of responsibility, of status, they change. All of a sudden, they become something extraordinary, arrogant. No. These are responsibilities and a burden upon the leaders. And in order for us to assume this responsibility, we have to lead with the concern of the greater good, not the singular. Not the singular. So when Umar ibn Abdelaziz received the Khilafah, he refused it. And he said, choose amongst yourselves someone who is more righteous and more pious and more deserving. فَأَبَوُ النَّاسِ. The people, they said, we choose you. So he took on the responsibility بِعَوْنِ اللَّهِ. And he promised to uphold the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And he reminded the people of death. And then he went home to his wife. Does anybody remember his wife's name? Fatima, ahsantum. Fatima, who was the daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and the sister of Umara al-Mu'mineen. So this woman, we mentioned her briefly. Behind every good man is a great woman. Behind every good man is a great woman. This is not a hadith, but if you look at it, you come from a woman. Ummuk, your mom, bore you for 9 months. She nourished you, cherished you, cared for you, brought you into this world, and she wants nothing more for you than to be the best. Habibi, if you think that you can pay your mother back, you are mistaken. And if you become a man, inshallah, and you grow, you still need a woman. Because a rajul al-kamil, a full man, he needs to have a woman. Minimum one. Minimum. Some of us need more than one. Allah yarzuqna. However, minimum one. وَهَذَا نُصْفُ الدِّينِ. And this is half of your deen. So for the youth in front of me who think that they can just get by and be celibate or I don't know what you call it, this is ridiculous and preposterous. This is sunnatul hayat wa sunnati Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And if you want to obtain success, if you want to obtain wealth, get married. فَوَجَدَكَ عَائِلًا فَأَغْنَى. The Sahaba كانوا يشتكون الفقر. When the Sahaba used to be concerned about poverty, what did they do? What did they do? They got married again and again. The ta'addud. They didn't fear nothing. They weren't afraid of poverty or what he said or she said. La. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has your best interest if you obey Him and if you fulfill His commands. So when he went home to Fatima, she noticed that he began to cry, and she said, "Ma yubkik ya Amir al-Mu'mineen?" فقال لها, he said, I've been burdened with the poor person who has nothing to eat, the sick and the weak, the helpless, those who are wronged and oppressed, the widows and the orphans and so on. And this is a mas'uliyah, this is now a responsibility upon me that I will have to answer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam will be present on Yawm al-Qiyamah to ask me what I did with his ummah. So he cried and he wept. It was said and it was reported that as soon as he became the Khalifa, he asked his wife for كُلُّ مَا تَمْلِكْ مِنْ كُنُوز وَذَهَبْ وَفِضَّةٍ. He asked her to give everything to him that she was gifted by her father and her brothers from her family of gold and silver and jewelry. She said, why, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen? He said, because your father and your brothers have taken this from Bayt al-Mal al-Muslimin. وَلَا بُدْ لَا رُدُّوهَا. We have to return it because it belongs to the Muslims, to the greater good. And he gave her the choice. He said, if you wish to live with me, you will live in poverty. وَلَكِنْ عَلَى تَقْوَى اللَّهِ. And if you wish to live rich, you can leave. And she chose التقية النقية العفيفة الشريفة to live with him, to remain his wife and steadfast. سَنَدًا لَهُ. She stood by him, rahmatullahi alayha. And it was reported that he received the Khilafah 99 years after the Hijrah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam on a Friday. You remember what some of the ulama said? They said, أول مجددين Omar ibn Abdelaziz. At the turn of the 100 years, he was marked as the first mujaddid, reviver of the deen. And it was reported that when he became Khalifa, the Bayt al-Mal opened his treasury and they handed out apples. تفاح للناس لكي يأكلون ويفرحون. And a few of the apples made their way to his home, to Bayt Fatima. And his son, his young infant son, toddler, was eating an apple. And when he saw this, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he grabbed it and he pulled it out of his mouth. And he said, no, this is not for us. This is for the Muslimin in general. So he returned it. And the child went crying to his mother. And his mother, she went and bought him an apple. And he said to her, he said, Waylaki, he says, woe to you, make sure that that is not from the wealth of the believers. She said, no, it is from my own wealth. And she bought the child an apple from her own wealth, so that he would not eat from Bayt al-Mal al-Muslimin. He said, when I plucked it out of his mouth, it's as if though I took it out of my own heart, but I cannot have my children eat from the wealth of the believers. This is Omar ibn Abdelaziz. Every dirham in Bayt al-Mal was accounted for. And he began with Banu Umayyah, with his cousins. He removed all the wealth that they took wrongfully from them. وَرَدَّهَا إِلَى بَيْتِ مَالِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. And he returned it back to the treasury of the Muslims. And it got to the point where he would grant wealth to anyone in need, Muslim and non-Muslim, the poor, the sick, the orphans, the widows. It got to the point where he established a social economic system where any youth who needed to get married, كان الزواج ضرورة له, he would receive financial assistance from Bayt al-Mal min al-Muslimin. Do you realize what this is? This is an establishment of society beyond understanding at that time.